Welcome to Section 3 of the Ladder 54 Basic Operator course. In Section 3 we will cover basic truck operation. The objectives of Section 3 include being able to identify key considerations for apparatus positioning. We'll identify basic apparatus setup procedures. We'll identify non-typical setup procedures. And we'll discuss the procedure for returning the apparatus to a road-ready state. As we covered in Section 2, we need to again review some considerations for ladder apparatus placement. Again, remember that the rule of thumb for where you park the apparatus has a lot to do with how tall the building is. For buildings that are 5 floors or higher, the apparatus should be parked as close to the building as possible to get maximum reach and use of the ladder. However, when buildings are 5 floors or less, in some cases we can park farther away from the apparatus, even outside of some of the first due apparatus such as the first due engine or tanker. But also you have to consider what kind of operation the apparatus has been assigned to. For instance, if you're in a rescue operation, in many cases the optimal positioning for the apparatus should be off the corners of a building, such as side AB or side DA. The reason why this is important is it allows the apparatus and the ladder to access 2 sides of the building from one position. Also keep in mind that if you're going to be performing rescue from the ladder, whenever possible, try to make sure that the ladder is parked upwind of the area where we're going to be performing rescue if it is a fire type rescue situation. Also, if we're going to be performing a ventilation operation, the apparatus must be close enough to the building for the ladder to be able to reach the roof. If we're actually performing fire suppression operations using the waterway and the ladder basket, we must remember that the ladder must be positioned in such a way that we can access as many areas of fire from one location as possible. When you arrive on scene, one of the primary considerations for the apparatus operator is what's overhead the apparatus. It's critical that you do not park under obstructions such as power lines, trees, or building overhangs that would limit movement of the ladder or prevent the use of the ladder altogether. It's also important to keep in mind and observe what kind of ground is underneath the apparatus and what are you going to be placing your outriggers on. If you're on solid ground such as concrete or asphalt, we do not need to set the jack plates to provide additional stability for the outriggers. However, in some cases where we're dealing with soft gravel or sodded areas, in many cases the jack plates should be used to provide a substantial, flat, stable surface for the outriggers to sit on. In cases of ice or snow, it's extremely important that there be ice cleats mounted on each of the outriggers prior to them being deployed. Failure to do so may result in the apparatus sliding on the outriggers while the ladder is up in the air. Also, water supply is an important consideration primarily during firefighting operations using the ladder and waterway. Where is the water going to be coming from? Are we going to be getting water from a hydrant? And if so, is the ladder truck going to have to bring their own water supply? If so, making sure that you identify your nearest hydrant and laying in your own supply line may be an important consideration. However, if you're going to be supplied by an engine or other apparatus, then they may be able to bring water to you. If we're not using hydrants, where is the water going to be coming from and how is the water going to be supplied to the apparatus? Remember that with the onboard pump, Ladder 54 can provide its own water supply. However, we need to make sure that whether the apparatus is going to supply itself or if it's going to be supplied by an additional apparatus should be coordinated through command. If you're going to be flowing water and using the ladder at the same time, it's important to remember that the ladder should be raised and put into its position prior to engaging the pump. When the pump is engaged, the automatic high idle feature on the apparatus is disengaged so that way there's not fluctuations in pressure. So remember, if you're going to be flowing water, set the ladder first once you have the waterway assembled and then engage the pump. That way it doesn't delay getting the ladder in place. Now we're going to discuss the apparatus setup procedures. There are several different procedures that we will cover, including if we're going to use the ladder only and only need to engage the ladder PTO, if we're only going to use the pump, similar to what a standard engine company operation would be, if we need to use the generator for lighting or other electrical issues, or if we're going to use multiple systems at the same time. We're also going to cover the basic deployment of the Outriggers for ladder operation. We're going to discuss the operation of the ladder rack, and we will cover ladder operations in Section 4. When we're getting ready to set up the apparatus, it's important to remember that we are going to be raising a long 100-foot ladder, and that making sure that the apparatus is set up properly and has adequate support will dictate how much use we're able to get out of our apparatus. First, we need to talk about the in-cab procedures if we're only going to use the ladder. We're not going to use the pump, or we're not going to use the generator. It's important that the transmission be in neutral and the apparatus parking brake is set. Something that's unique to this apparatus is a front axle service brake switch. This switch activates the brakes on the front axle only and assists in keeping the vehicle stable and prevents it from rolling. Once the front axle service switch is set, then we will activate the ladder PTO switch. You will hear a very easily detectable change in the engine and a small whine, indicating that the ladder PTO is now engaged.
Go ahead. Okay, first when you arrive on the scene, to engage the ladder, place the transmission in neutral, set the parking brake, engage the front axle service brakes, and then engage the ladder PTO.
If we're going to use the pump and ladder in conjunction with each other, we will follow the ladder only procedure first. This will allow us to raise the ladder and get it into its position faster than if we had the pump engaged also. Once we have the ladder in the position we want, we will disengage the ladder PTO switch. Then, near your left knee, you will activate the pump transfer case switch, place the transmission in drive, starting the pump, and then again activate the ladder PTO.
To use the pump while using the aerial device, first remove the aerial device out of gear, engage your pump, place it in drive, then re-engage your ladder PTO.
If we're going to operate the apparatus only using the apparatus pump, similar to an engine operation, this would be very similar to what most of you are already used to. It's important to remember that we need to open the tank to pump valve and the tank recirculation valve prior to starting the pump. This prevents damage to the pump from running it dry without any water in the pump case. Once you have both the tank to pump and tank recirculation valves open, you will go back to the cab, engage the pump transfer switch, place the transmission in drive, and then the pump will be engaged. You can verify that the pump is in operation by looking at the speedometer, and a positive miles per hour indication should show on the gauge.
To operate the pump, first place the transmission in neutral, shift the transfer case to pump, then place the transmission in drive. Take the pump out of gear, place the transmission in neutral, shift the transfer case back to road.
This apparatus also has an onboard generator. The generator can essentially be used anytime the apparatus is parked and is not moving. To engage the generator, find the switch located in the lower left part of the dash next to the pump transfer switch. To activate the generator, simply move the switch to the on button and a red indicator light will be illuminated. When you're done with generator operations, simply move the switch to the off position and the red indicator light will no longer be illuminated.
To operate the generator, at any time, simply engage the generator PTO. To disengage the generator, simply deactivate the generator PTO.
Once you have those operations completed, it'll also be time to deploy the outriggers. It's important that once again a 360 walk around of the apparatus is completed prior to deploying the outriggers to make sure that there's sufficient clearance for the outriggers when they come out away from the vehicle. Ensure that all the outriggers will have stable ground underneath the jacks as they come down. Remember that the preferred surfaces will either be paved or at least a good solid gravel surface. If you have any concerns about ground stability, at a minimum use jack plates that are provided to provide a more stable surface. Remember also that it's very important to make sure that the ice cleats stored in compartment 11 are used if there is snow or ice covering the area where the outriggers will be deployed. On this slide, you will see the operating console for the outriggers. There are two panels on the apparatus mounted in the back left and rear right corners of the apparatus. The joystick is the central automatic operation for the joysticks. For normal operations to deploy the outriggers, you will simply grasp the joystick and move it to its far left position for the left control panel. This will automatically deploy the outriggers and will automatically increase the engine RPMs while the outriggers deploy. You will continue to hold the joystick in this position until the engine RPMs return to idle. Now, if for some reason there is an abnormal operation for the outriggers, the two blue buttons allow independent control of each of the outriggers for the left and right hand side. In most cases, we will not need to use these buttons and functions to set up the truck. The yellow buttons to the left are the rescue basket control buttons. Once you have the outrigger set, you will depress the top yellow button. This will rotate the rescue basket into its up position for use by occupants. You will also notice that above the yellow and blue buttons are a green and a red indicator. The green indicator is a standby light for ensuring that all the pressure on the jacks is appropriate for ladder use. The red indicator light is a pilot light for axle locks. This should be illuminated, stating that the axles are in their locked position for ladder operation. So once again, when you first deploy outriggers, you should do this from the left position. You will grab the joystick, hold it in its left position, and the engine RPMs will automatically increase until the outriggers are in their positive position. When it's done, the engine RPMs will return to idle. Before you move to the right side of the truck, however, remember to use the yellow buttons and rotate the rescue basket into its up position so personnel can occupy the basket.
Under normal setup, simply press the outrigger lever to the left. Until the RPMs drop. To raise the basket, press the basket raise button.
Next, we're going to move to the right side of the truck. When you get to the right side of the truck, there will be another outrigger control panel, and there will also be a ladder rack panel. It's important before we raise the ladder that we verify that the ladder rack is in its full down position. To operate the ladder rack, you will first turn on the power button, and then you will use the down button to bring the ladder rack to its full down position. You'll also notice that there is a green indicator light that indicates when the electric motor to provide movement for the ladder rack is activated. It's important that once you're done with ladder rack operation that the power switch is turned off so that it does not damage this electric motor.
After setting the driver's side outriggers and raising the basket, then do the passenger side outriggers. Simply press the lever to the right. Until the engine RPM drops. Then lower the ground ladder rack. Hold until it's completely down.
If for some reason the ladder cannot be set up and the truck cannot be set up because of uneven ground and the truck will not self-level, we may need to use the box cribbing that's provided in compartment 11. We can use this cribbing to overcome higher angles and non-level surfaces. However, remember, it is important that you do not stack more than 2 boxes on top of each other for jacking. In other cases, there may not be adequate clearance for the outriggers to completely deploy from the truck. If this is the case, you can use the independent control buttons, the blue buttons we discussed previously, to limit the distance the outriggers come out. However, when you short jack a truck and you move the ladder to that side, remember the computer will be monitoring all ladder movements and will limit the rotation and also the distance that you can extend out away from the truck on the side of the truck that is short jacked. It will limit both its reach and its rotation. In conditions of ice and snow, there will be limited friction underneath the outriggers. It may cause the apparatus to even slide with the ladder deployed in some cases. Anytime that the apparatus is going to be set up on ice or snow on the roadway, make sure you use the ice cleats. Also, during the firefighting operation, if the ice and snow under the outriggers begins to melt, it may cause the computer to recognize an unstable condition on those outriggers. In some cases, we may need to reset the outriggers if melting occurs. Once ladder operations are done and we're ready to return the apparatus to the road, we will discuss auto bedding in section 4, but it will be important to make sure that the ladder is completely bedded and that we have an indicator of 3 green and 1 white light from the turntable operator's position. Once we have 3 green and 1 white light, we will retract the right side outriggers and return the ladder rack to its up position. We'll then move to the left side outrigger control panel and we will bring back the left side outriggers and the ladder basket will be returned down. If we use ice cleats, make sure that they're returned to compartment 11 and make sure that you perform a walk around of the vehicle and verify the vehicle is ready for the road prior to moving the vehicle. So in section 3, we've covered some key considerations for apparatus placement and positioning. We've talked about basic apparatus setup procedures. We've discussed briefly some non-typical setup conditions that may occur, and we've covered the procedure to return the apparatus to the road.